And welcome back here to Mythic Championship VI. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe, and that is Paul Cheon. Thanks so much for coming along for coverage here early in the morning on day one, where we have booster draft for you. Now, we just got a chance to watch our main feature match player, who was Shahar Shenhar, draft his deck. He ended up with a blue-black control deck with some really good highlights, and the middle part was just okay.
Yeah. I think he started out pretty strong. He had a good mix of removal that he took early, but then that middle of the pack, it looked like blue-black just completely dried up.
Yep.
And then we saw the draft recap, and we saw that Bradley Yu, who was passing to Shahar, was also in blue-black. So he ended up, it's very likely that he has the second best blue-black deck at that table.
That's right, even with some highlights in the form of that Lockmere Serpent coming to him, pack 2, pick 1. So let's head on down. He's going to be playing, by the way, Shahar against Alexey Shashov from Russia, and we will... We took a look just briefly at his deck list here, Paul, and he's playing blue-white flyers is the best way to describe this deck.
Yeah. I mean, you see Shine Chaser, a bunch of flyers, and he does have a couple of removal effects, a couple of trapped into towers. So, this is kind of your classic blue-white sky strategy, right? You're trying to muck up the ground with some corridor monitors, some cheap threats, and then, of course, just go over the top of your opponents with those big flyers.
Interesting to see how the matchup actually plays out as well, coming from Shahar's perspective, where he does have access to some pretty decent removal spells. But as I mentioned before during the draft, he did end up with 0 copies of So Tiny, which are actually quite good against a strategy like what Alexey's bringing to the table. Ooh. He's got a gargoyle here, and it's going to get snapped off here. Turn 1, Mystical Dispute. That's brutal.
Wow, did not expect to see that one.
1 island on the battlefield for Shahar Shenhar, and he says, your Vandrus Gargoyle, send it away.
Wow, that is amazing.
Got him, as we say in the business. And Shahar's follow-up play is he's going to go ahead and get the mill going with Merfolk Secret Keeper. The sad tactician here, Ardenvale tactician, no other cost, just running out the 2/3 flyer. Totally fine though.
And yeah, but at the end of the day, still a 3-mana 2/3 flyer, which is just a very, very strong rate in general. Oftentimes a 3-mana 2/2, what we refer to as Windrake, is a card that you're okay having in your deck. So this is well above that rate. Of course, it's a little more difficult to cast, but I think Ardenvale Tactician, one of the best commons in the set.
Yeah, it is. It's certainly the best white common, even outperforming cards like Trapped in the Tower. You see Prized Griffin as the follow-up now for Alexey, so he's done well. He's got himself with 5 power in the air ready to beat down. As Shahar struggles with his mana, he's only got islands.
Yeah, he's got that epic downfall in hand, but he can't cast it because it's all islands in play. And one thing that I want to also note, just specifically about this matchup, is Shahar, kind of the early part of his curve, he's really good at just kind of mucking up the ground, but he really does struggle against flyers.
Yeah.
And his deck might just match up very poorly to Alexey's flying strategy, where Alexey's just playing basically all flyers with a couple of ways to just kind of stall the ground.
As if to highlight your point here, Paul, he plays Shambling Suit. So 1/3, which is going to do absolutely nothing on this board as Alexey pulls further and further ahead. He's going to fire off Opt, a smash in for 5, and Shahar's life total is plummeting very quickly here. He could be dead in just a couple of turns if he can't find a swamp. Oh boy, he found a Reeve Soul as well. So he's actually perfectly positioned to take care of both of the threats, but he had to have found the Black Mana Source. That window looks like it has closed on him.
Yeah.
Because now he's going to be down to 1, so even if he finds a swamp next turn, he simply can't deal with both threats, and he's just going to be done.
Yeah, and Shahar even had a Steel Gaze Griffin here, so had he drawn land number 5, even if it was an island, he would have had a blocker. But at this point...
Unfortunately for him, it's another copy of Epic Downfall, but that also describes the game there for Shahar Shenhar. So, game number 1 going to Alexey Shashov in quick order there, and it was mainly a question of mana there for Shahar.
Absolutely. Shahar had all the answers. If there's one thing about Shahar's deck is, it's got a lot of really solid removal spells, right? His cheap creatures aren't especially good, But, with the Reef Soul, the double Epic Downfall, and even the Witch's Vengeance, he has a lot of ways to just remove creatures off the battlefield. And he's really going to be kind of focusing that removal spell on all the flyers that he sees because, of course, he has plenty of ways to just block on the ground.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that does seem to be the case here in this matchup, where it could be really tough if Shahar doesn't find the removal spells, and of course, as we saw in this game, the mana to actually cast them. If he does, though, that game goes a lot differently.
Oh, yeah.
He's, if he had a swamp instead of one of those islands, he would have taken no damage or minimal damage from those flyers, and he had the Lochmere Serpent in hand, which is very difficult to deal with, and he may well have been able to just finish the job there.
Yeah, for sure.
So. All right, well, I guess we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll have more right after this.
Hey everybody, look, it's Brad Nelson here. We're going to crack this pack of Throne of Eldraine. Do the honors if you would,
Alrighty.
sir. And let me know what you're thinking about as you lay these cards out on the table, like, ooh, you're hiding them from me? No, we want to see. Okay, which ones you like, which ones you don't like. What's going through your mind here?
All right, so far, I do like white and green for like common first picks if nothing really excites me. This is a tough one actually, because
Ooh, I like a tough one.
So Oathsworn Knight is actually a pretty good card, but black tends to not be that aggressive. There's very few aggressive decks. Even though a lot of teammates have told me I should take it and I should trust them because they're better at limited than me, I have found that I only win with creatures with power and toughness, just in general. So I'm going to take
0/0 is not up your alley.
No, it's not. So I'm going to take out Muscle, try to draft a bunch of big green creatures, have high power, high toughness, and use that to leverage.
Oh, come on. Lucky Clover's sitting right here, Brad.
Maybe a few years ago, but I have not felt that lucky lately. So I'm going to stay away from that as well. It's a little too tricky for me. No, I really like green-white strategies and even like green-blue I've been successful with. And a lot of that's based on adamant green creatures and spells, I guess. So I'm definitely first picking out Muscle, and everyone's going to tell me how wrong I was.
Well, that's what Magic's all about, right? The ability to tell people how wrong their decisions were.
At least in my experience, it is.
I've got to ask, though, this Ardenvale Tactician, you mentioned white. I know some people really like this card.
Yeah, when I started drafting this format, a lot of people said they didn't like white cards, but I was winning and seeing a lot of success, and that was one of the best ones. I think that's the best white common. I just really like green, and a lot of it has to do with outmuscle and a lot of the early creatures. I've just had a lot of good experience with the card.
All right, well, let's try and outmuscle our opponents in this draft. It's our pack one, pick one.
And welcome back to the booth here at Mythic Championship VI. That is Paul Chiano, Marshall Sutcliffe. Thanks so much for coming along and checking out early draft. Now, that game one was blistering. That was bang, bang, bang. And as is often the case as well, when we look at, a mana situation where the players, can't cast their spells, or one of them does. So let's take a look at table C, which is Mike Sigrist versus Bradley Yu. Now, you mentioned Bradley was the other blue-black player right at the table, so we can make some assumptions about what he's got going on.
Yeah. He was the other blue-black player, but he was in a much better seat than Shahar because he was the one feeding Shahar. And, he has kind of one of the more important cards if you're wanting to be that blue-black control. Like, he has Revenge of Ravens, which has kind of risen in stock as people have looked to be more aggressive over time. And that's going to be a really important card in this matchup because Mike Sigrist has drafted a Gruul aggressive deck. This is and Shahar was feeding to Mike. So Mike is the one who saw all those powerful Gruul cards and is like, you know what? I'm going to go into this because this feels very, very open.
That's right. Now, the one good news, and this is really interesting because take a look at the board here for Mike, and you could see how poorly this could line up against Revenge of Ravens. He's got triple Gingerbrute on the battlefield.
Yeah.
So that's kind of rough. But let's not also forget, though, Gruul is known for being able to make large individual creatures, which actually combat that type of card pretty well.
Yeah, definitely.
In the meantime, though, there is no Revenge of Ravens to be seen here on this battlefield, so the cookies are attacking, and in they come.
Yeah, and this is actually I believe, kind of just the strategy that I've seen people have more success with if you want to be green. Oftentimes you're like, I want to be big green creatures.
Yep.
What I've seen people have more success with is the trackers and Gingerbrutes as getting super low, playing a bunch of 1-drops, and then playing halberds and attaching them to these creatures to get underneath opponents.
It's destroy.
Have you ever heard anybody refer to the halberd as a rancor?
I have. They're extremely incorrect, but I see where they're coming from.
All right, so we're going to see a block here, as well as Drown in a Lock to take down 2 of the Ginger Brutes.
It always feels bad when you have to use a removal spell on a Ginger Brute.
It really does.
You know, you need to do what you need to do. You got to get that off the battlefield.
Sigrist is going to keep his mana intact to just go ahead and get an adamanted 5/5 here. And it does resolve. You could see he kind of was like, does this happen? Because he is facing a Folio of Fancies as well, which is the type of card that can slam the door quite quickly on a game. And you can see that Sigrist has a pretty well built out graveyard already.
Yes, Folio is actually a fairly fantastic finisher if you are drafting that blue-black control deck. Once you've stabilized, now you don't want to be using it in the early turns of a game because you're just filling up your opponent's hand to kind of put additional pressure. But in the late game, you get to scenarios like this where you have 8, 10 mana in play, and it can close the door pretty quickly.
So let's see what happens on this turn here for Bradley. Because this is a pretty big turn for him. He's going to pass a turn back, though
Cards in hand is
he does have mana available.
Yeah, you draw, and then how many cards in your library?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15.
So it looks like 15 cards left in the library there for Sigrist.
So probably not going to be able to get the job done.
Right. Bradley's down to 1. Right. So, yeah, that's a much different scenario here. What you'll often see is that the players will activate the Folio during the opponent's draw step to make sure to mill for maximum. But let's see if Sigrist can finish off this game here before we head back to our main match.
Yeah, so Bradley absolutely has to have a removal spell for the Ginger Brute, some way to get it off the battlefield, because Mike simply just has to spend 1 mana to make it unblockable. Only creatures with haste can block. Not a lot of haste creatures in blue-black.
Yeah, blue-black, that's pretty much unblockable. But you found out the hard way. One of the ways you can get blocked.
Yes. Crashing Drawbridge is one of the ways to be able to fight.
It can really ruin a Ginger Brute's day.
I foolishly attacked 2 Ginger Brutes after spending mana into an active Crashing Draw. I feel like I've made basically every mistake you can make in this format. But hey,
Once.
You make it once, and we call those learning moments.
That's right. Learning moment. So in the meantime, Sigrist is crashing in with everybody. Now there are 2 blockers on the battlefield, so theoretically 2 of these creatures could be blocked, but he's going to need an answer. Bradley has to find something for this Ginger Brute. Does he have a way to interact? And he does. He has a So Tiny for the little baby Ginger Brute. And then he can go for a chump. No, he's going to want to eat up.
Well, he can't block the Cavalier, however, because
of its ability. So he's going to need to return it to hand, and he's going to do so.
Okay, so he lives.
He does.
To survive here. That's big.
Bradley Hughes survives. He also tries to set him up the next turn. He returned a Tome Raider to hand, which he can then recast and get a card off of. But as you mentioned, the Paladin has that extra ability where it can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. So this is going to be an ongoing problem for him, especially if he ends up having to chump block with scavengers. That's a tough situation to find yourself in. So he will need to find a removal spell here, but he has got Sigrist down to just 1 threat.
Yeah, and that was such a huge turn from Brad because he had 2 plays. I mean, but Mike, usually when you play against somebody, they keep up open mana. You kind of expect them to have at least one thing because it looks like you're dead on board. But the fact that he had Runaway Together plus the So Tiny was absolutely crucial here. And now Brad has access to a bunch of mana. He has the ability to tap a creature down with the spinning wheel if something happens, and he has access to, of course, activating that Folio as well.
Yeah, it's clunky, the spinning wheel, but when you're facing down a lethal attacker that you know, really the only thing you can do is chump block. Well, you're happy to have the access to it, so that's what he's going to do. And now let's see if Sigrist can come back here, though, and maybe put out 2 creatures. You know, ideally just anything with some power here, ×2 would be excellent for Mike.
I'm curious how many red cards Mike Sigrist has, because he's got only the forest in play.
He went for the 2-Unveiled Treefolk that was on an adventure, but it got Mystical Disputed here, just the good old-fashioned way.
Oh, yeah.
Cards and
But once again, that's a big step there for Bradley. This game's getting really interesting, as Bradley has been able to barely cling to life.
Yeah, and he drew a
But
Foreboding
he's
Fruit.
trying to set up this turn because Mike's basically been playing 1 spell per turn since we've been watching. And, you know, that Folio of Fancies can do some nasty stuff if he can finally get a little bit of breathing room where he can activate it to make them draw a bunch of cards and then mill you out.
Yeah, but he still needs to find an answer to that knight.
Yeah. The Paladin, it is interesting because, you know, he does have 1 block, right? Like,
Right.
he has 1 turn, and he's currently facing down mono green, which doesn't have a lot of haste in it, though there is a little bit, as we saw the Ginger Brutes and stuff like that. So there's Tome Raider, draw a card, go, and it looks like he found Foreboding Fruit, awkward. Ooh, there's finally a mountain off the top of the library, though, for Sigrist, who has been sitting on multiple red cards for this entire game.
Yeah, very curious to see if he has a way to just close it out here.
Yeah. He's got a Grumgully in hand, so that's one way that he could set up for future turns, but that wouldn't get the job done just straight away.
Oh, and now, you know, Bradley is
Oh, but he's got
out.
Fling. Send it at your head, and that is the last point of damage to Bradley Hughes. So Mike Sigrist is going to take that game, and that means that we get to pop back to our main match here and see how they were doing. Mike finally found that mountain. He really just needed that mountain, and then things went well for him.
You know, Bradley, as soon as that mountain hits the battlefield, he's like all of a sudden an entire new world of hurt becomes unlocked.
Because he was
Just
barely
like-
hanging on.
Right, yeah. He was barely hanging on. All of a sudden, you're like, oh my goodness, he drew the mountain. He's got 4 cards in hand, and he hasn't played anything.
Yeah.
What's the worst thing you can do?
No, yeah, you're
Or
totally
direct
right.
spell.
What's the worst thing that could happen? Well,
Well,
there's 4 of them in hand there. So let's get underway here in game number 2, and you can see that Alexey, after having taken game number 1, understands his role here. He's going to run out Fairy Godmother and just start chipping away. An unchecked Fairy Godmother on turn 1 can easily get in for 4 or 5 points of damage, you know, before Shahar can find a way to nullify that. So you
Yeah.
can see why Alexey's keen to get that going. Opt for Shahar, and he says, hey, Alexey, check this out. It's a swamp. Didn't have one of those in the first game. And it looks like he's just going to attack the hand here with Memory Theft. And let's see exactly what Alexey's dealing with, says Shahar Shenhar.
Oh, and interesting, Alexey did not run out the Shepherd of the Flock on turn 2, even though it was his only play on turn 2. So maybe just realizing that his primary game plan here is to attack in the air, and that it's very likely for Shahar to have a blocker. But typically, you know, you would expect somebody to want to, especially with that outflank in hand,
Yeah.
you would want to maybe curve out, but looks like he was playing it slow there.
And then Alexey's double checking about the extra text on Memory Theft. As you can see, it can only take cards that are on an adventure and put them in the graveyard, effectively taking the creature side away. In this case, there was no target for that part, so it's just the Shepherd. But
Big
I
draw.
am surprised he didn't just run out the 3-1. I mean, you know, playing a 3-1 on turn 2, even if you just get to hit once with it, you're like, hey, we did it.
And that was a huge draw from Alexey. He only had the 2 planes, and he drew the blue source to be able to play that Shine Chaser in turn 3. And if he draws an additional land, that is huge, because then he can drop that weapon rack onto the battlefield, which will not only pump the Shine Chaser, but then it can also pump the Shine Chaser again.
That's right. And, you know, Shahar sees the writing on the wall there, says, I'm not going to risk it. Let's just get rid of the Shine Chaser. And that might look weird because Epic Downfall is one of Shahar's best removal spells, and it just took down a 1/1 flyer, but the potential damage from that card was too high, and Shahar recognized that and took it out. And now this is interesting. He drew the Vantress Gargoyle again, but remember game 1? The exact same thing happened.
Wow,
Mystical
double
Dispute.
spell.
And he did it
Double
again.
spell.
Jeez, that's some efficient stuff there from Shenhar. And what does he have to follow up? Womp, the Misfred
turtle.
River Turtle.
Turtle.
Oh, man, that turn prior was so sweet, and then it's like, here's my 1/5 year
Yeah.
move.
And Alexey only really has one thing he can do.
Yeah.
He has one game plan. He's going to stick to it here, play flyers, get him big, and try to end the game.
And that's exactly what's going to happen. So 2/2 flyer now, and it's not going to get any smaller. He's a little bit all in on it, right? If Shahar can find a way to kill or nullify the Fairy Guidemother, particularly after Alexey uses another weapon rack activation, he could be in business here. Interestingly, Shahar actually has another copy of Epic Downfall in hand, and he just doesn't have a target for it.
The Guidemother
It's
is not
too good.
Yeah, the Guidemother is not epic enough.
No, exactly.
But it's pretty epic right now. That's a 3/3 flyer on the battlefield.
And probably going to go to 4/4 next turn because right now Alexey doesn't really have much going on. Little surprised to not see him just use that opt in the main phase to see if he can find a threat, but he decides to stay patient and pass the turn back.
Shahar needs to find an answer here, so he's running out that unexplained vision.
Yeah, this is big for him.
And he does have the adamant.
He does, yeah. So this is the type of card that can propel you into the late game as he gets to draw 3 and now scry 3 to set up next turn and turns going further than that as well.
And Reeves, he has 2 of the removal effects, and neither of them are going to work. He's got a Reeves Soul that he's looking at, but that Fairy Guidemother is going to be a 4/4.
Yep.
So it's going to be able to dodge both the Epic Downfall and the Reeves Soul.
There are very few cards that can do that, but here we are. Weird.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about his premium removal spells, but neither of them are actually able to get this off the battlefield. What can he even draw
Yeah,
here?
he didn't. I don't think he ended up with a runaway together.
There
which
was no
would do a
bacon to
fine
apply.
job.
He has a Moonlit Scavenger.
Yeah, there you go. He would need to do some work to make that work, but that would do it.
Before that, yeah.
Old Misty looks like he wants to. Nope. Hold up. Let's just opt first, says
Like
Alexey.
he's doing that before attacks just in case he finds an Ardenvale Tactician.
Sure.
So might as well save the point of damage.
Just mize a point of damage,
Yeah.
as we say in the business. Yeah, sure. But instead, he's going to go ahead and take one on the chin from the turtle.
This is actually, I'm really curious because if he chooses not to make that Guidemother into a 4/4,
Oh my
that's
God.
big,
That's huge.
right?
Yeah.
Will Alexey play around something like a Resoul? And it looks like, yeah, he's just going to get in there, make a big 4/4 flyer.
It is very tempting to just
Oh,
throw
yeah.
the counter on there. It gives you a clean clock of 2 more turns in the air. It does happen
It
to play
attacks
around
through
Reef,
Steelgaze Griffin, so you just want, and not only that, this is a 2-turn clock now.
Yep. So that worked out well there. And it looks like he's just going to pass the turn back. He doesn't play his land.
Huh. Yeah, that is interesting because if Shahar did just choose to take a turn off to use some kind of hand disruption spell here, I think you're happy with that.
That's right. He has Hypnotic Sprite in hand, so perhaps Alexey just really trying to sell here.
And Shahar absolutely needs to find an answer to the Guidemother. None of the other cards matter here.
Right.
He's on a 2-turn clock. He needs to find a way to get that Guidemother off the battlefield with a bounce spell or maybe chain some flyers together.
So he's going to run out. Are you serious?
Yep, there's the Reef Soul. Not going to do it.
This is incredible. He has Witch's Vengeance, which also doesn't kill this Guidemother. It's just, he's drawn all 3 types of removal that he has, and somehow this 1-drop dodges all of them.
1 mana 4/4 flyer. That's how you beat.
That's where
Shahar
you need to
Shenhar.
be. Incredible.
Can I read?
If it costs more, he could kill it. If it had 1 less toughness, he could kill it.
Yeah.
Now, is there a way that he can combo it, though, and go Vengeance plus Reeve Soul?
Yes.
That would work,
He
right?
could do that.
To kill a Fairy Guide.
Hey, you know what? It's better than dying. So that is his play next turn.
And it's going to be a disaster because Hypnotic Sprite, the Mesmeric Glare, counters a spell with converted mana cost 3 or less. And I mean, I think you're like, Witch's Vengeance, you're like, you got it. And then when they go for the actual removal spell, you just get them.
And it looks like he's just going to run out of locked in a tower here just to...
Yeah, trapped in the tower just because.
Yeah, just because, you know...
But he has kept up Hypnotic Sprite, and if Shahar goes for the convoluted double trouble here, it's not going to work.
Well, and he doesn't have really any other option here, right? He's
Yeah.
at 4. He can play a flyer to chump block, but that would be it, right?
Yeah,
So this makes the most sense. And Shahar probably just has to go for it here because he's in such a bad spot. And with Alexey, with his counterspell, that should lock it up.
He did draw a Wishclaw Talisman, which
Wait.
maybe he has some idea.
Shahar has a Mystical Dispute in hand as well.
What?
Okay, so he can actually, so that's a second Mystical Dispute.
That works if
So
he has it.
If he has it, he can go Witch's Vengeance, game Fairy,
This is
then play
incredible.
Reef Soul.
Look at this. Witch's Vengeance. And Alexey's like, are you serious?
Wait, you're going to let this one resolve, right? You let
Absolutely.
this resolve, force Shahar to have something like a Reef Soul, use Hypnotic Sprite, and then that Mystical Dispute's going to get that Fairy Guide Mother.
Right. In fact, he's like, okay, sure, dude.
And look, I bet he feels so
He names
comfortable.
Fairy. He's
already
like, look
said
how
Mystical
clever I
Dispute.
am. Here comes Reef Soul.
Oh, man.
And we're going to see a counter back here from Alexey. And look at this Mystical Dispute for the blowout. Wow, Shahar Shenhar. And by the way, when I say blowout, I mean he got to do his 2-for-1.
But, I mean, that was huge,
Massive,
right?
massive.
Like, not only did countering an adventure card, it's like you're countering 2 cards. Now you don't even have that flyer anymore.
Wow, that was amazing stuff.
And
What a sequence for Shahar.
I mean, is Shahar going to stabilize here? Because he has
Absolutely.
an downfall too.
Yeah.
He can get this prize Griffin off the battlefield, and he's, sure
what he just drew?
Sure, this was a 2-for-1, but he cast an Unexplained Visions. He's up on cards right now.
He just drew Lockmere Serpent too. So if you want to close the door on the game quickly, fine way to do so.
Right.
Incredible.
And Alexey used Trapped in a Tower already.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, incredible sequence there for Shahar Shenhar, using every bit of resources and mana to solve the problem in front of him.
Oh, and that's huge too. He had a Charm Sleep. That was an additional potential answer.
So now we're going to see the Epic Downfall come out and knock that Griffin out of the sky. The weapon rack out of weapons, so that's just sitting there doing nothing currently.
Shahar needed to cast 3 spells
Yes.
to get that Fairy Guide
Yes,
Mother off the
off of
battlefield.
6 mana.
But he's turning it around right
Yeah.
now. I mean, Alexey needs to put more flyers onto the battlefield because Shahar has the ground locked up.
Yeah, I think Shahar's just in really good shape at this point. He just drew Charm Sleep as well. Now he can just be like, go and run out the Serpent if he wants. Like, he's just got options now on how to maneuver this game. And there it is. The Serpent's going to hit
And
the
I'm sure
battlefield
Alexey's
on
thinking
end
to
step because
himself, what
Alexey has
just
nothing.
happened, right?
Yep. Incredible.
He's going to have nightmares over that Mystical Dispute. It was the second Mystical Dispute,
It was,
too.
of the game.
You cannot put your opponent on the second copy. It's just so hard, right?
And both of them were so good.
Yeah. Oh, my
The Vantress Gargoyle
Oh,
was
yeah.
the first target. Unbelievable stuff. Lexi's done. He is going to scoop
mean-
them up, and Shahar Shenhar finds the line in game number 2 to pick up the win. Looks like calm, cool, and collected, but that was insane.
Yeah.
This is why Limited's awesome, right?
The thing
Like,
is, you have to be reeling from this, too. If you're from Alexey's position, you had to feel so comfortable. Shahar leading off with Witch's Vengeance. You're like, yeah, whatever. I got a counterspell. And then Shahar with 1 mana left after the Reef Soul. At that point, I mean, just even looking at the body language of Alexey, he's like, yeah, I got this. Hypnotic Sprite. Nope. Second Mystical Dispute. I mean, it was a blowout. It really was.
It was. Especially given the stakes.
Yeah,
Right? I mean,
absolutely.
that was a lethal flyer. Like, Shahar's on 4. All right, looks like we can pop in over on our side table here and see Jess Estefan playing against Matt
How many
Schwab.
Ginger Brutes were in this
Yeah.
draft? Because we saw Mike Sigrist with 3 copies.
Yeah.
And we got 2 here on Jess's side.
And it looks like she's just beating down here in game number 3. And I believe she's actually mono white here. Yeah, wow, super aggressive. Oh, I see. She's got 14 planes and 3 idyllic Grange. So mono white. And it looks like it's working well for her so far.
Although she did
Trail
just
of
basically
Crumbs.
take a turn off to get in for 2 points of damage with the Ginger Brute, which
Oh,
if you're on the other
there is
side, you have
fair.
to be pretty happy about that exchange.
Yeah, that is a sequence that can't continue over and over again
Right.
and have Jess come out the winner.
She must have a bit of a clunky hand here because you really just want to continue adding pressure, adding threats to the battlefield.
And against white, Matt feels very clean. Just, yeah, I'm going to run out the 4-2. And it looks like Jess is going to go ahead and return Fairy Guidemother to hand. And that could let her get in for another hit of damage next turn. So just trying to pile up as much damage as possible is Jess here. And I'm sure she can see the writing on the wall here. She's playing against green-black food. And, you know, she knows she needs to apply maximum pressure here. So that's what she's going to do.
Yeah, although this only really allowed her to get in for 1 extra point of damage, as the adventure on Fairy Guidemother cost 2 mana.
Uh-huh.
And so she was unable to attack with the other Ginger Brute.
Why?
Because
He gives flying, though, right?
Well, but there's a Spore Cap Spider in.
Oh, I didn't see
so-
the Spore Cap.
Yeah,
I thought
so,
it was a...
so I mean, she got it for an
true.
extra point of that, but I mean, this is huge, a huge loss in terms of tempo. I mean, you
Yeah.
only have that 1/1 on the battlefield, and Matt just might be able to turn this around here just by putting additional. Look at this, he's got 8 power on the battlefield against 2.
Yes. This is, of course, the downside to Ginger Brute. It looks good when you can pump it or equip it. It's awful on defense. Just absolutely horrendous. In fact, its best role is to get gobbled up as food. And, of course, if Jess finds herself in a position where she needs to start using the Ginger Brutes as life gain, that's a sign that she's going to lose. Land number 4 here for Jess, though, so we could be in business.
Yeah, I mean, she's on the back foot here now.
Very much so. Yeah, the Deathless Knight coming in with haste is, like you said, 8 damage. It's like, oh, wow, okay, this isn't great.
Deathless Knight, I mean, very, 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 very great, good card.
Strong card.
In the Golgari food deck, right? There's just so many different ways to gain life. So
That's right. Yeah, the most obvious is just food, right? Like food itself. But there are others that pop up. Sometimes.
yeah, of course, just lifelink, right? Smitten Swordmaster, getting it back, just a lot
exactly.
of different ways.
And it's one of those things that pops up like somewhat often. So we have a full race situation here on our hands, though. She's going to play Scalding Cauldron, run out the Fairy Guidemother, make both of the Ginger Brutes unblockable. Although, now that we say that, you know, if Matt really wants, like if he decides he doesn't win this race, he could just start leaving back the Deathless Knight.
Right. Yeah.
It
Deathless
actually
Knight,
can block.
It does have haste.
Yeah.
And that, you know, after playing with Ginger Brute for so long, you almost forget that people can actually block.
I know.
Right? It's just
I
like you
even
just-
shorthanded and just say unblockable.
Yeah, you just assume that it's 1 mana Ginger Brute's unblockable, but no, there's actually ways to block if you have that haste creature on the battlefield.
Let's see what Matt does here.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like he's got a lot of different options here.
Yeah, you know, to me, this is a big turning point for him on whether he'd like to stay the aggressor or whether he views it as too risky. Because, look, when you have 5 spells in your hand, you often think to yourself, how about I just stay alive for the next 3 turns and deploy all these spells? What are my chances of winning that game versus taking on the riskier line here?
It's also just kind of scary given the fact that you've seen Jessica be so hyper-aggressive here with the Ginger Brutes. You have to think that there's maybe some pump spells coming, and she just has a game plan here to just finish you off.
Yep.
So that's why you might want to slow down just a little bit to kind of see what might be coming.
Yeah, the interesting part is just, you know, from his perspective, he has to try to decide, well, can I close this game out in a reasonable way? And he's decided, absolutely I can. I'm
Yes,
going to get
2
rid of
lethal
your
attackers
only
next
blocker
turn.
and slam for 8.
Yeah.
Now he has 2 lethal threats, and he's at comfortable 7? Maybe not so comfortable, but at 7 life, facing down, really only 2 power at the moment. So, yeah, and also a thing that we should keep in mind here too, Paul, is this is game 3. So Matt has had a chance to see what Jess is up to, right? He knows what her game plan is and some of the tricks that she has, and that he probably has figured out that she's only mono white at this point, that kind of thing. So Matt also has a lot more information at the ready than you normally would, like in a game 1. Okay, the Shepherd's going to come into play here. And then she's going to take out the Witch. But now she has to pass the turn back, Paul. This is not where she wants to be, not even close.
Now, Matt, trying to just get a sense for what he could be working with. But
Well,
I
he's
see-
got out
I-
muscle.
I see an out muscle,
Yeah.
and he can use that to get the Shepherd of the Flock off the battlefield if he targets his Spider, and then he can still attack for 4, and Jess has to make the decision whether or not she wants to double block here,
Oh, goodness sake.
right? And it's a lethal attack, so she does have to block.
Yeah, and
So-
this is
so-
interesting because he's actually going to go ahead and just send in with the Spider, too, and why not? That's a 2-turn clock on its own.
Right. So now the question is, does Jess have somehow 6 extra damage in her hand, right? Because she could technically just block the Deathless Knight, then attack with the Ginger Brute. But Matt's sitting at 7 life, and it's pretty unlikely if you're just a mono white deck to have that many access to that much pump. So, it looks like now Jess is on the back foot. She might want to just double block the Knight and just hope Matt doesn't have a way to gain life, and that also just puts a lethal threat off the battlefield next turn. But
This
she's just
seems-
not in a good spot.
This
here.
seems like an untenable spot here for Jess. Like, if she gets the Deathless Knight off the battlefield, she goes to 2 and is facing down to 2/6 that she has to deal with or block. And the prospect of her both dealing with that, plus maybe a potential Deathless Knight coming back down the line, while also building out a board that she can use to actually kill Matt, seems slim. But, there are mythic rares, there's bombs, right? I mean, there's ways that you can change the game significantly. And let's see if she has it here, because this is a critical turn for her. She's going to need to deal with this Spider on some way. It can be a block if it has to be.
Yeah, I think I saw Sir Alan.
Sir Aelin?
Sir Aelin.
Yeah, that's what you saw.
Now, if
That
Matt had
works.
something like a Foreboding Fruit, I believe you can use that. You can target
Yes.
anybody.
Oh,
right?
yeah, you can.
'Cause that,
Yeah.
that would be something that could be lethal, but I'm not sure if he has that.
Yeah, any removal spell, of course, gets the job done
course.
for him here that can kill Sir Aelin, or as chat says, Sir All In.
Sir All In. Yeah.
But you would think that if Matt had the immediate kill in hand, that we would have seen that.
Yeah.
One interesting thing that Matt does have access to there, you see the Smitten Swordmaster at the top of his hand. So if he can, if he needs to, he could maybe build out a board over the next 2 turns that produces 2 knights and then get the job done. Alternatively, he could just run it out as another lethal threat and just sort of keep one creature ahead of
Right.
Jess.
And it does have lifelink, so if it does connect even with another creature, you can get that Deathless Knight back from the graveyard.
Right. Oh, totally.
Yeah.
And also, it makes it that much less likely that you die on that attack step. So, okay, it's going to
Double
be a
spell.
Swordmaster.
Is that a Piper?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, that was a pretty good turn there for Matt. But the key here is that he has put out lethal. He is just. It's kind of like in chess, right? It's like check.
Right. So I suppose the Piper can still get in, and Jess would still potentially survive. So she just needs to play another creature this turn to just not be dead here.
Yeah, the thing that you brought up before that I think is becoming very relevant is the Deathless Knight in conjunction with the Smitten Swordmaster at this point. If she trades off something, if the Knight comes back, like, it starts getting pretty ugly.
Yeah, the nice thing is Sir Alien does have first strike, so if she does put the Legendary Knight in front of the Smitten Swordmaster, it would prevent the life gain. Oh, and it looks like Jess has 2 plays here, which would be very big.
Okay. So she's going to get a 2/2 and a Squire.
Oh, and I think that was a Garen Brick Carver.
2 cards.
Carver would be very good here. Sir Aelin, doing a good job of kind of holding back the fort, or the assault, I should say. Oh, but look at this.
Wow, and her
Reaper of
hand,
Night is
double
gonna,
knight.
Yeah, is going to take away the rest of Jessica's hand. That was brutal, just in the sense of going forward, all that gasoline gone.
Right.
Now she gets her draw step for the turn, and she does have plays with the unicorn here, but ouch.
Yeah. But she is continuing to just put creatures onto the battlefield.
Yes,
here.
she is.
She's getting, and with the Sir Alien on the battlefield, of course, that also threatens a very massive attack here.
It does.
Matt
Yeah.
does need to be a little bit careful here, but of course, he's the one with the loaded hand here.
The funny part is the lack of mana here for Matt is really what's holding him back. He's just had 5 spells in his hand this entire game.
Huge draw here for Matt Schmaltz, though.
Oh, he
Epic
found an epic downfall.
Epic downfall on Sir Alien is going to be very, very big here.
Super brutal.
He still doesn't have a great attack this turn, so I think he's still just going to hold off, pass, and he can still make a 1/1 token this turn, right?
Right. He could just use Piper of the Swarm to make a rat. I mean, he just has an embarrassment of riches here. He's got 4 more spells in hand plus onboard stuff. There's the rat coming into play.
And of
Remember,
course, there's
the rat
Reaper.
has menace.
There's also that Reaper just on standby.
Yeah.
If he gets to land number 7.
I think he may win this game before that happens. You can see Matt is making sure to not open the door to die. Cards like Fairy Guidemother are very scary when you're at 7 and all of a sudden they can just go, Guidemother, Guidemother, you're dead.
Yeah, absolutely. That Spore Cap Spider
Hold down the
at least helps him with that potential out. But yes, cards like Ardenvale Tactician, also things that you need to be aware of, because that's why the aggressive strategies are successful. There are so many ways to just kind of push in for the final few points of damage. In white, you have 2 commons, right? There are some of the considered the premium commons too. Fairy Guidemother along with the Tactician means that you're almost never safe.
Yeah, the Squire too. That thing gets you in for a bunch of damage as well. There's Charming Prince now for Jess.
And we're getting close to lethal attack here. That's 5 creatures to 4. And Matt just continues to put additional threats onto the battlefield every single turn.
Yeah, the rats are flowing now here for Matt. Yeah, she did gain the life, so now she's up to 5. And I think that's Curious Pair in hand for Matt. So she's going to take a quick read on Piper. He does need to sacrifice 3 rats in addition to the 4 mana in order for him to gain control of target creature.
He
But
will
he's
have
gonna
access to that next turn.
That's right. So there's the 3rd rat hitting the battlefield. Does he have any other play? No, he's still on that grind.
It's a Curious Pair, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Matt's just got so many different options here.
Yeah, it's also tough because, when the plan doesn't go right, if you're mono white, you're often left with so few options down the line. Like, her removal suite, not really much of a thing here. And Matt has had so much time to just build out now after he stabilized.
Yeah, so now Matt has the ability to make an additional rat and also gain 3 life, pad the life total. He also has, of course, the instant speed activation of Piper of the Swarm with the ability to sacrifice 3 rats and take over a creature. He might just choose to do that this turn and just take that prize Griffin because, of course, Jess also sitting at 5 life. She is very close to dead.
Yeah, and she's recognized now, all right, well, the time has come for me to jam here, but this cannot work against Piper of the Swarm because he can simply throw the rats in his blockers and then steal the Griffin.
Yes.
And what is she supposed to do?
Right. So now Matt's going to be able to just eat one of the creatures with that Spore Cap Spider. Maybe even try to pad his life total, get back that Deathless Knight.
I like it.
Which could potentially present a lethal threat here, right?
That's right. And it's a trade, so.
Yeah, and he's going for a double block here on the Unicorn, so that'll get that off the battlefield too. He's going to steal that prize Griffin, get back Deathless Knight, and if Jess has nothing, I mean, I think he's going to be able to attack back for lethal.
It's a disaster, yeah. And I mean, you can understand why Jess decided to send in here.
Oh, no, he would not be able to do enough damage there. Oh, is that a Realm Cloak Giant?
Yes. Though when? So
I imagine just no damage was taken.
She just said, okay, fine, all that happens.
Yeah.
You don't take anything, and then I'll cast Realm
Did the
Cloak
Spin
Giant.
Swordmaster gain Matt life?
So I didn't see if it blocked a first striker, but it theoretically should have in wow.
What? Wow.
So
What just happened?
Realm Cloak Giant
But that was a Garenbrick Carver on a Bognati. That's a lethal attack.
Oh, unbelievable
Jeez.
finish there. Wow, that got really quick down the stretch there. It looked hopeless for Jess, but she actually did find a way to put herself in a winning position. It looked like it wasn't quite enough.
Yeah, no, I mean, her deck looked pretty solid. You know, nice mana curve, and then even some bombs to boot. But yeah, Matt.
The old ginger brewed into rum cloak giant curve.
Look, it's the backup plan. It's the backup plan.
Wow, that was a great. I did not anticipate that finish for that game.
Right.
But there we go. So that was ultimately Matt, though, taking that down. And now we're going to go back to our main match where we have game 3 incoming. Alexey's had a bit of time here to kind of catch his breath and maybe recover from that flurry of 3 spells from Shahar in game number 2 that he used to end up ultimately winning it. There's Venerable Knight to kick things off for Alexey, but Shahar fires back here with Smitten Swordmaster, and that's a fine way to approach this. Shine Chaser, go.
Yeah, Shine Chaser, always a scary card, but currently Alexey doesn't have anything else in play to pump it up, so simply just a 1/1. And Shahar, still, the threat is very scary, so he might just use that Reeve Soul to get that Shine Chaser off the battlefield.
Instead, Shahar's just going to start chipping in here with a Swordmaster, and that does actually prompt a trade here. Alexey recognizing that his game plan of trying to kill Shahar in the air isn't going to work too well if he's taking 2 lifelink hit.
Yeah, the worst case scenario here is somehow Alexey plays enough threats where Shine Chaser becomes a 4-power creature, and all of a sudden you're staring at that Reeve Soul and thinking to yourself, why did I not cast it? So
yeah,
it makes a lot of sense for Shahar to fire it off, especially given his hand. I mean, he's got that Lockmeter Serpent, he's got that Wishclaw Talisman, he's got some late game cards.
Well, Fairy Guidemother's going to start attacking, but I'll tell you what, it doesn't look nearly as good as it did in the last game. There's a Prize Griffin, but that can't even get away of the Guardian here.
Huh. I wonder if Shahar's going to use the Wishclaw Talisman just to get an epic downfall, just to get that Prize Griffin off the battlefield. Of course, that gives Alexey the option of finding the best threat in his deck as well. But if he doesn't have another play, that might be what he's going for.
So there it is, Wishclaw Talisman on the battlefield, and he's going to activate it right now. So he says, here, friend.
The thing is, if the game just kind of goes a little bit longer, that Lockmeter Serpent is going to do a lot of work.
Yes.
So,
and I think that we see Shahar recognizing that by going to get this card, the Epic Downfall here. He has basically just done everything he can to keep his life total as high as possible to give himself enough time to leverage that Serpent.
Yep.
And that makes perfect sense, right? Now, it's a little bit dangerous, right? You can't feel happy giving your opponent a Wishclaw Talisman.
That's kind of the risk you take when you play that card, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's what you signed up for, no doubt about that.
And Alexey with several options here. There's also an Unexplained Vision in his hand, and I think he drew a Prize Griffin off the top, so he's probably just not even going to activate that Wishclaw Talisman because he doesn't want to give Shahar the opportunity to find something else.
It's funny how that works, though, right? Because if that ends up being the case, Shahar's like, great.
Yep. Shahar able to race a little bit here. He's got that 4-power creature attacking in every single turn, and then now he's going to be able to just slam that Lockmeter Serpent at the end of Alexey's turn. Curious to see what he's going to do here if Alexey does fire off the Unexplained Vision, because Shahar does have Mystical Dispute in hand, but, you know, that feels kind of bad, right? Because you could have just run out the Lockmeter Serpent, and instead you're just using a counterspell. But, you know, he has a control deck. You don't want your opponents to be up on cards. What is Alexey going to do here? And I'm sure he has fear of Mystical Dispute. I am sure of it. That card has...
He might for the rest of his life.
Well, we're going to see a good amount of that in the standard portion as well, so he should be expecting to run into that.
Well, I'll tell you what, if Shahar has it, he very well may run it out, and he does. He did have to think about it because the Serpent was an option. Yep. But still, Unexplained Vision is really powerful. The Wicked Guardian once again gets in the red zone, but now Shahar has access to his big bomb.
I mean, Shahar is close to lethal here, right? He's got the Serpent and he's got the Wicked Guardian. If Alexey doesn't attacks with the flyers and doesn't have a blocker, I mean, Shahar is just going to win.
Yep. Yeah, Alexey could be under the impression that he's on a 2-turn clock when he really isn't.
That's a Hypnotic Sprite, which he might just run out as a flyer.
He might.
Right?
It's tempting to try to get sneaky here,
Have 2 cards.
but if he does run it out, it it would be actually much better for him. Although in this situation, he's in a pretty tough position.
Yeah. Yeah, if he does run it out, he will have the option of blocking the Wicked Guardian if Shahar chooses to attack with both the Wicked Guardian and the Lochmere Serpent. Also, keep in mind, Alexey does have access to that Wishclaw Talisman, right? He can use it to get a locked into tower or something to help with the racing situation. But of course, he also knows that Shahar has access to a ton of different removal spells. So if he finds a removal spell for the Wicked Guardian, Shahar can then easily follow that up with a removal spell on the Prize Griffin.
Using the talisman.
Exactly.
Right.
And, of course, because there's 0 counters left, Alexey would be simply left with a Wishclaw Talisman with 0 counters.
Yeah, he is going to go ahead and just run out the Sprite here, leaving himself with really nothing left, just an island in his hand as he passes back. But we're going to see Lochmere Serpent. And I wouldn't even be surprised to see Shahar just use the, yeah, there we go, make a black, sacrifice the land, gain a life, draw a card here on end step.
If he finds a removal spell, I mean, that's
GG.
it, right? So that's
Yep.
what he's looking for.
It is GG if he finds a removal spell here.
If he finds a Charmed Sleep, that would be an option.
Sure.
He's in good position either way. He's going to attack with both, prompting a trade here. And bringing Alexey down to 1 life.
Yeah, Alexey next turn very likely to get that locked into tower here. As you know, he needs to absolutely answer this Lochmere Serpent as it is a lethal attack.
Yeah, if he gets trapped in the tower, then he'll have the Prize Griffin to block the opposing Griffin and theoretically be stable.
That was not a bad draw. That was a Moonlit Scavenger. He can actually use that kind of as a tempo play on the Lochmere Serpent. But the problem with that is then Shahar can simply cast it end of turn again and then make it unblockable in attack. So then you will lose that opportunity, that window, to put a locked into tower on the Lochmere Serpent.
Yeah, here comes
I mean, if
the
he's
scavenger.
casting it, he's committing to bouncing the Serpent here.
Kind of funny too, it's the talisman that's turning it on.
No good attack here.
Now he just going to have to pass a turn back here. And Alexey not getting trapped in the tower. He's just going to sit here on this talisman for now.
I wonder if he has, does he have like a counter spell maybe that he can fetch? That would be big.
Yeah, it's just he has to do it on his turn, so it's like
Right.
very awkward.
But, you know, Shahar, if he simply just passes and plays a Serpent, I mean, he's going to get this,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So Alexey, mindful of that, needs to find a way to play around it somehow.
He does. It's interesting if you're sitting in Shahar's seat too, because, you know, the Serpent has flash. He could have run it out there to make sure it doesn't get countered, but then he doesn't play around cards like
Yeah, this
Trapped in
is
the Tower.
really interesting. So Shahar could respond and play the Serpent if you think Alexey's going to get a
Yes.
counter spell,
Yes.
right? But if you think he's going to get a locked in a tower, yeah, I mean, this is all interesting. At this point, I mean, he needs to get a counter spell, right? That's like, I think, the only card. He could also get, oh no, he put an Ardenvale Tactician up top, right?
Yeah.
So that allows him, that buys him some time.
Right. Shahar's at 11. 4, 7, 8. It would be a 2-turn clock. If Shahar just did nothing, which is impossible because he has a
Right.
Wishclaw Talisman now, then it could work. But realistically, he's going to need runner minimum here from Alexey.
Yeah, because keep in mind, Shahar can now use that final counter on the Wishclaw Talisman, get whatever he wants, and he won't be punished.
The Ardenvale Tactician will serve an important role there for a moment, but it's not a good long-term answer. But that is what he ended up going to grab. Very interesting position we find our players in here, though, thanks to the Wishclaw Talisman. It's kind of forcing this leveling game, right? On, well, what do you have? What could you get? What do I need to play around? But ultimately, it's going to be Shahar who benefits from it. He will have gotten 2 cards off of his Wishclaw Talisman. The first one's kind of even. Now he'll be up a card, and of course, these are cards of his choice, so very powerful. This is interesting. Prize Griffin's going to attack.
He kind of sees it as a free attack here because he's going to use that Tactician.
But it's not free.
Well, this is not going to trigger it yet, right? He needs to find 2 ways to
That's
draw
right,
cards.
that's right.
It's on his turn.
But he could.
If Shahar finds another opt,
Right.
he
did,
that,
though.
yeah. The easiest way to do it, of course, would be a thrill of possibility, but that's not in Shahar's colors.
Right, of course. So instead, they're just going to bounce off each other, but Shahar on end step is still going to run out the Serpent, and he's going to have both of his flyers tapped down here by the Ardenvale Tactician just to stay alive. But, likely Shahar's just going to activate the Talisman. No, he's just going to let him do it. Because you can activate the Talisman anytime on your turn. It's not sorcery speed, it's your turn. So if Shahar had a way to interact with the Talisman, like I didn't say please or something, he could have just said, okay, I'll just do that. But he didn't.
Yeah, now Shahar has a lot of different options. I mean, it looks like he drew a Moonlit Scavenger, so he can actually go for a nice tempo play here and run that out, bounce the Prize Griffin, have 3 lethal threats on the battlefield while also taxing Alexey's mana. And then maybe wait on the Wishclaw Talisman on the following turn just to make sure he has all the information available to figure out what exactly he needs. Does he need a removal spell? Does he need to draw cards? There's just a lot of different things he can, of course, get with that Wishclaw Talisman.
Okay. I need both of you to play a bit faster, okay? Sure. It's a reminder for both of you.
Yeah. All right, here we're going to go, though. Here comes the Wishclaw Talisman. There's got to be a win in his deck somewhere here, right?
Wow, and he got a memory theft, it looks like?
Yeah, I think he can just...
Okay, so he can use that, get information on what Alexey has, and also just get that Ardenvale Tactician if he really wants. So is that what he's trying to do? But he can't run out the Lost Legion because he tapped the Swamp for the Wishclaw Talisman.
Yep.
So if Alexey finds
3, 7, 8,
4, 8, like 3 damage here somehow, he could potentially win.
Yeah, 3's a lot. Two you can find.
With the Silver Flame Squire, but...
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, and he's going to have to extend the hand. Alexey really needed to find something off the top there and didn't. And it was Shahar Shenhar who took down our main match. Very well done. Super interesting match, too.
He had to scrap for this.
He really did, yeah.
And, of course, the big turning point being that ridiculous stack in Game 2 where Shahar had to fire off Witch's Vengeance into Reevesoul into a 1-mana Mystical Dispute to counter a Hypnotic Sprite to get a 4/4 Fairy Guidemother off the battlefield.
Into the second 1-mana Mystical Dispute of that game, the third of the match.
Because he had already fired one off turn 2 or 3 of that game.
Yeah, that was a really great showcase of some of the depth that you can get in Limited, where you're playing around cards that you know exist, could be in your opponent's hand, but you know how it goes in Standard. It's pretty safe to assume that the card you don't want them to have, they very well could have, and you're very well suited to play around it and less forced to otherwise. Here it's like you really have to make a judgment call, and that's what we saw here.
Yeah, and you know, just the biggest upside of Shahar drafting a deck like this, a control deck, means there's so many different windows, so many opportunities for you to potentially outplay your opponent, right? This deck has so much play to it with the Wishclaw Talisman. It felt like he had infinite options at any given point, and when you kind of put that deck in the hands of one of the best players in the world, I mean, this is what happens, right?
That's right. Yeah, he needed everything to get the job done, but he did. With that, we're going to be taking a short break. When we come back, we'll have news and updates at the desk with Maria.